It's imperative that you ask these questions. This is how you move the transaction along. So group insurance, no insurance, whatever it is, we've established the needs. So do you understand why this makes sense, right? So Mr. and Mrs. Client, Bob and Susan, let me ask you a couple of questions. Question number one is this, okay? If money weren't an issue, how much coverage would you want your family to have? That's it. If money weren't an issue, how much coverage would you want your family to have? And I let them answer. Most of the time, the client will give you an answer that's in the ballpark. Now, if the client's living in a $300,000 house, he says $50,000, you might need to stop and back up and give him a little bit of an explanation of what life insurance is for. It's income replacement, right? Okay. But by and large, they're going to give you the right answers. Let's say the client says $500,000. Say, okay, so $500,000 is what you'd like to have if money was not an issue, right? So Mr. and Mrs. Client, listen, the next question, money is always a concern when it comes to these things, right? You'd agree. How much do you feel that you could put towards on a monthly basis? How much do you feel like you put there monthly comfortably towards making sure that your family was properly covered? Most of our clients, before you answer that, Mr. and Mrs. Client, say somewhere between $50 and $100 a month. Some of them say even more than that, okay? Some of them say as little as maybe $30 or $40 a month. Mr. and Mrs. Client, where do you feel like you could comfortably be? In 6 months, you're not thinking, gosh, that's yeah, we could definitely do that. And I get an answer. And virtually always they pick what? $50 to $100 a month, which now again, talking to you as an agent, you're sitting there with a 60-year-old smoker who is living in a $5 million home, he's talking to you about a $3 million policy, you shouldn't talk about $50 to $100. You got to kind of know the ballpark, but that's called framing. All I'm doing is I'm setting an expectation of where that premium is probably going to be, and I let them pick. Remember from earlier, when you say it, they doubt every word. When they say it, it's 100% true. So when they tell you what they can afford, you're never going to have a money issue. When you tell them what they should be affording, you're going to get some resistance from time to time, right? So again, the two questions are, if Mr. and Mrs. Client, if money wasn't an issue, how much coverage would you like to have for your family? And my next question, Mr. and Mrs. Client, obviously money is always a concern. How much do you feel like you could put towards this on a monthly basis that you would be comfortable with to make sure that your family was well protected? Most of our clients, before you answer that, will say somewhere between $50 and $100 a month. Some of them say even more than that, and some say as little as $30 or $40 a month. Where do you feel like you could comfortably be? And I write down the numbers. They say, well, probably between 50 and 100. Okay, great. More on the higher end, more on the lower end? Well, probably, more on the higher end. Okay, so, we definitely don't want to go over 100, but we want to keep it below that, right? Very good. And what I do is I go into Quick Quote and I create a product that works in this scenario, which again is why you need to learn how to frame it appropriately. You can't say, you do it for $30 a month on $1 million and they're standard and 55 years old, right? So you got to be making sure that you're in the ballpark so that when the numbers you're showing them come back, they're in the range, okay? So that's the two closing questions. So here's the close. And again, it's really not a close, it's information. People that are empowered consumers make good choices. At the end of the story, people in America are very intelligent. They want to do the right thing. They just don't know where to begin. Nobody's ever told them. They don't know who to trust. And they've never educated them. So here's what we're going to say. So let me give you a couple of nuances here. Let me give you some qualifiers before we go through this. Many states have different free look periods. Okay? The state of Michigan, where most of my business is a 20-day free look. But you need to use the free look period in this example that is in your state, okay? Otherwise, you're going to give them some wrong information. That's number one. Number two is on Term Now, okay? That's an instant issue product. Some of the time frames here are going to be a little more condensed than what I'm explaining to them, okay? So you need to make sure that you'd know if you're quoting them Term Now because you just did the quote. So it's Term Now, you got to adjust the time frames in here. But this is how I explain the process to the client, okay? So I say, Mr. and Mrs. Client, before we start, 100% assumptive. So we've gone through the presentation. We've told them the reasons why. We've gotten buy-in that, yeah, that makes sense. We've gotten an expectation set. I want this much coverage for around this much. We've showed them numbers that work. Here's the assumptive close. Mr. and Mrs. Client, what we're going to do today is we're going to file an application. With that application, we're going to put a 1 month's premium on a deposit, okay? Let's call it $75. It's going to go in with the application. It's just going to sit. There'll be no more premiums withdrawn unless you put this policy in force, like a good faith deposit, okay? From today forward, all right, we will begin covering you for free conditionally for the next 30 to 60 days for up to a maximum of $500,000 each. You're applying for $1 million, we're not going to cover you for that, okay? But $500,000 each. Okay, that coverage is going to start today, and I'm going to explain a couple of things to you here about that in a second. Okay, but during the next 30 to 60 days, I'm going to need you guys to do 2 things for me. One is I'm going to need you to do a telephone interview where they're going to call you and ask you the same medical questions that I ask you today. So I need you to make sure that you tell me things exactly as they are, okay? No hiding stuff. If you're concerned, tell me. My job as an agent is to help you navigate and make sure that you've recorded these things accurately, okay, so you don't have problems later on. Number 2 is you're going to do a paramed exam. Blood, urine, vitals, maybe a resting EKG or a full EKG. It will be paid for. They'll come to you. You can go to them. It's really flexible. Now, what I need you guys to do is I really need you to do this virtually immediately. I'll tell you why in a minute, okay? But those are the things we're going to need to do. Now, about 30 to 60 days from now, Mr. and Mrs. Client, we're going to get a physical policy back, okay? Once we get that policy back, I'm going to come back and we're going to go through it, okay? And again, in Michigan, we're going to start what's called a 20-day free look period. So in that 20 days, Mr. and Mrs. Client, you guys have 3 choices. Choice number 1 is you can say no thank you, okay? Well, why would you do that? There are situations from time to time where the company declines coverage. They say, based on how, we're not going to offer it to you. Or sometimes they come back and because of this or this or this, the coverage offer is much, much more expensive than we initially thought. So the moral of the story is if something comes back and it's just not something we can work around, you do have the ability to not move forward with it. If you choose to do that, the money that's sitting on this deposit will be refunded to you in full. So Mr. and Mrs. Client, I just need you to understand, there's no risk to going through this process, okay? It doesn't hurt you to try this, okay? The second thing that's also unlikely, but more likely than this, is that it comes back potentially slightly different, maybe considerably different than I've shown you, okay? As much as I'm going to do my best to guide you the right way, I'm not an underwriter, okay? And I'm not going to make those final decisions. So it may come back and we may want to make some changes. We can increase it, we can decrease it, we can change the term length around within that 20 days with no issue. So if it comes back as a little bit different, we can make changes, okay? So we're not set in stone today on what we're applying for, okay? We'll be able to make some choices once we really see what it is, okay? Mr. and Mrs. Client, the third option, this is probably what's going to happen, is going to come back exactly like I've shown you, okay? And you're going to say, this is good, this is exactly what we've talked about, I want to keep it. So at that point, you're going to sign the policy into effect. The money that's on deposit is going to come out, and it's going to pay 1 month forward, okay? So let's say it's the month of March, hypothetically, right now, okay? So Mr. and Mrs. Client, March and potentially some of April, depending on how long it takes you to get underwritten, okay? But let's just call it March. March, you're going to be covered for free for this conditional coverage amount. April rolls around, the policy issues. April will be paid for, Mr. and Mrs. Client, by what? I circle it. I make sure they understand from the deposit, okay? This ensures the client understands that there's going to be money coming out of the account right now, and they understand, it ensures they understand what's going to happen with it, right? It's either going to go back or it's going to apply to the premium. So sometime in May, in this example, you'd start paying your premiums. So Mr. and Mrs. Client, what I'm going to need from you is just your driver's license, and I'm going to start asking you some questions. So if you get that for me, that'd be great. And that's it. People are afraid of making a bad choice. This educates them in great detail on exactly what process they're going to go through, the time frames, sets their expectations, lets them know their opportunities at the end, and it sets the expectation that if things don't come back as we want them to come back, that we're not stuck into something here, that we can work together. It sets a stage for a great relationship. So I start taking the application, okay, and here's where I go back to this. and I explain conditional coverage, because there are many that don't understand conditional coverage the way that it needs to be understood. Conditional coverage on a Primerica policy, okay, through any of the Primerica companies, MBL in New York, Primerica Life, and the rest of the country, they don't understand how it works. It sort of turns on and off throughout the interim, right? As soon as there's a requirement, as soon as a medical requirement's issued, and it's not done, that coverage shuts off. So when I'm typing it in, I say, Mr. and Mrs. Client, remember I told you you're going to need to do the telephone interview and the paramed exam, right? Here's what I need you to do. They're going to call you over the next couple of days, okay, and I need you to promise me that you will get that call returned as soon as possible. Now, listen, if you're at work or something you can't pick up, that's fine, but I need you to promise me that you're going to return that call immediately, because as soon as they have a requirement for that and it doesn't get done, they're going to shut down that free coverage temporarily, okay? Now, as soon as you do it and you comply with it, you're good, right? They do the paramed testing, right? They schedule it, it's not done, you're not covered. Now, as soon as it's done, that coverage turns back on. So what I want to do is I want to eliminate down to an absolute minimum the amount of time that coverage is off, okay? So it should, if you get it done quickly, it'll be on virtually the majority of the time. But if you don't, then you might be in this little bit of a gray area. And again, I'm doing this while I'm taking the app. I've explained to them what's necessary, and now I'm reiterating, right? I'm essentially post-closing them on making sure they quickly do the paramed and quickly do the telephone underwriting, right? And that helps you get the policy issued quickly, helps you eliminate not take-ins. It's really a powerful thing, okay?